for Martin, it only got worse when the state sent her a bill in the spring of 2021 saying she needed to pay back $15,000.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
AL.com has some good reporting on the issue of unemployment in the state. And, we all know that during 2020, unemployment skyrocketed for a short time, meaning more people than ever were getting unemployment benefits. And actually, if we'll recall, there was a lot of issues about people getting their unemployment at the time, and some Republican lawmakers tried to make this big anti-government, anti-bureaucrat deal about it, right?
Even though, this has happened under their watch, under their funding choices, under their personnel choices. But, all that aside. And
I remembered this because it was so I remembered covering this over 2 years ago now, because it was so frustrating seeing these lawmakers try to place the blame on a world historic on responding to a world historic health event on just regular ass government workers. And so let's take a listen. Let's do a little throwback and take a listen to what we were saying on this program 2 years ago as they were trying to kick up a stink about unemployment.
There was about half a dozen Alabama lawmakers from the state house that decided to go on an unprompted fact-finding mission, is what they called it. And they stormed the Alabama Department of Labor. And, ostensibly they were concerned about their constituents that were not receiving their unemployment benefits that they were supposed to be getting. And so they wanted to go in here and see what's happening in this government bureaucracy, all these lazy public employees not working for Alabamians. That's what they wanted to go in and find. That's what they wanted to go in and find. They hate public institutions, and they want more than anything to be able to tear them down. But anyway, what they found was a building full of dedicated public servants getting more work done faster than at any time in the history of the agency, with a third of the staff that it had 10 years ago. A third of the staff. They have sent out more payments in the last 2 months. The Alabama Department of Labor, the good public servants down at the Alabama Department of Labor have sent out more payments for unemployment claims in the last 2 months with 80 employees than they have in the last several years. And this is with a third of the staff that it had in 2010. In 2010, it had 240 employees. Now they have 80. They're doing more work than they ever have in the history of the agency, faster with a third of the staff.
So that's what was happening back then. And we don't need to lose sight of that. And of course, back then, there were people that were going. I was one of those people that I had people in my life that had to get on unemployment, and it was a laborious process, and it took a long time to be able to get in touch with anybody, and it was very frustrating. But whose fault is that? It's not the people that work at the DOL. It's not their fault. And so obviously there were problems, but we need to understand where the problems are coming from. And instead of shoring up the Department of Labor then with necessary resources and staffing, they have continued to allow it to languish. Listen to this from AL.com's recent article. Quote, Alabama saw a whopping 580% increase in claims between May of 2019 and May of 2020. The department stated in a filing in a lawsuit, Alabama received 1.4 million unemployment claims since April of 2020, and 1.1 were COVID-related. 1.1 million were COVID-related, according to the Department of Labor. Yet, 2 years later, as of April 2022, over 12,000 appeals still have not been heard. And wait times in Alabama were longer than anywhere else in the country in 2021, according to the Century Foundation's analysis of federal data from August of last year. In Alabama,
yet another list where we're at the bottom.
Yeah, yet another list. And think about this, 1.1 million unemployment claims being done by 80 people. By people that you could fit in like 2 classrooms. 1.4 million. 80 people. In Alabama, the average appeal case was pending 566 days at the Department of Labor, nearly twice as long as the second most delayed state, Georgia, where appeals were pending 367 days on average. In Kansas, cases pended an average of just 15 days, and in Utah, just 19 days. And they do a good job of underscoring the human tolls that these debts are having on people. Here are a couple of examples. Quote from the article, "For Martin, it only got worse when the state sent her a bill in the spring of 2021 saying she needed to pay back $15,000. She took a second job at a grocery store that pays $10 an hour. The law firm she works for full-time only pays $9 an hour. She works more than 60-hour weeks and spends her evenings at the grocery store standing on a prosthetic leg." Edward Terry, 51, drove for Uber in Birmingham when Alabama shut down in 2020. His customer base disappeared from the streets and he filed for unemployment. Last year, Terry got a letter from the state saying he owes them $7,299 of those benefits. He sent an appeal and said he hasn't heard from anyone. And to add to this frustration, all of this is totally unnecessary. It's totally gratuitous suffering being inflicted on the working people of Alabama. In 2021, the federal Department of Labor gave states permission to completely waive overpayment debts for people who got unemployment during the pandemic. Some states, like Massachusetts, Florida, and New Jersey, are recognizing the burden of thousands of dollars in surprise debt following the economic disruptions of a global pandemic and are forgiving the overpayments. Alabama is not offering blanket forgiveness. So not only are the debts having a toll, not only are they unnecessary, and not only are some of them done in error, and not only can it take years to get an error resolved, but in the meantime, you might still get your wages garnished. Going back to the article, Alabama is also behind other states on hearing most appeals. So when an error does occur, it is often not resolved, but people are still left with thousands of dollars in debts and threats from the department that their wages may be garnished or their tax returns seized if they do not pay. Truly wild. Truly wild when we could just not do this. We could literally just not do this. We could not inflict gratuitous suffering on working people of Alabama. And yet, our leaders in Montgomery are choosing to shake people down, to shake this woman down who works 2 jobs, more than 60 hours a week, both of them under $15 an hour, standing on a prosthetic leg, choosing to try to shake her down for $15,000. Why? Why would we do this?
It's a lot different than the accountability for those PPP loans.
It's
and
insane.
I think, yeah, so this segment has really motivated me that we have to do a segment on that, I think, now, because the contrast just couldn't be more clear. You had these companies, and in some cases, it's kind of a stretch to call them companies, that received lots of federal money with very little strings attached, very little accountability, and the way they've been treated and the way they were allowed to use this money, very, very different from the way these poor folks have been treated by the unemployment system.
Of course. Of course, because that's how the system is. The system is not made for working people. The system is made for bosses, for rich people. And that's exactly, that goes exactly back to what we were talking about. Attorney General Steve Marshall sitting on a child labor case for 5 months. Dozens of instances of violations of this law, with obvious knowledge of Hyundai, its subsidiary, and the independent contractor, and the third party, the temp agency or whatever. Obvious violations of child labor laws in the state of Alabama. But we're not going to be enforcing that. Instead of going after Hyundai, instead of going after foreign millionaires, instead of going after people who are taking advantage of children in the state of Alabama, what are we doing? We're going after working people who are working 60 hours a week at multiple jobs for less than $15 an hour for $15,000. It's just absolutely disgusting. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.